Have you ever wondered how recording a tutorial feels like? So here is your answer. Okay, return back to curl grab component. I don't know why. Oh my god. Seems like everything is correct. What the f is that? What about here? Oh my... Welcome everyone to the second part of the tutorial. And as you can see, it's really hard to make tutorials and I've been sitting a lot just to do this one and make sure everything works. Thank you everyone for the comments in the previous tutorial. I really appreciate it. Also guys, I created a Discord channel where we can share our own experience or answer each other's questions, so feel free to join. And please make sure you're subscribed in this channel and leave a like under this video. That is the main reason for me keeping up doing those tutorials. With no further ado, let's jump into the tutorial. So our current stage is that we are having a gun and we can actually grab it. You can see our index finger is not able to press the trigger, and that's what we are going to do now. To do this, we first have to create the animation. So we are going to our hands folder. We are going to animations. We can open our animation. Let's drag it here. And now we can go to our skeleton. Once we're in our skeleton, we're going to preview scene, then preview controller and use specific animation. And here we need to choose our handgun pose. Once we have chosen the handgun pose, we now need to create a new animation that will imitate our trigger pressed. So what we'll have to do is just to click on our index 02R. Maybe we can move it a little bit this way, and also our index 03 this way. That's how we're going to imitate our pressed trigger. So now all we have to do is just to press create asset, create animation, current pose. And let's name it anim qk handgun trigger pressed. And what we have to do is that we'll add another blending between this animation and trigger pressed. So our next step, we'll create a blend space for our trigger pressed. We'll go to our hands folder, we'll right click, animation, legacy, and blend space 1D. And we are creating it for our QK custom hand skeleton. We can call it blend space 1D, trigger type. We can open it, and the same way it works here. So instead of 2 axes right here, we're going to have only 1. So we can name our horizontal axis as gun type. As you can see here, we have our 2 gun types. The first one is handgun, the second one is assault rifle. So we're going to create our trigger type based on our gun type. Therefore, our zeros element is handgun. So here, our zeros element will be also for handgun. Therefore, we are adding our newly created animation handgun trigger pressed on here. We can Ctrl-Shift-S and return to our VR template map. Our next step will actually go into our hands, to our hand anim, and we're going to our state machine. In case you're landed on this page, we're going to our state machine, we're going to our object hold, and here we'll actually blend the result of this pin to our trigger pressed animation. But before doing this, we have to create a float variable that will represent of how hard the trigger is pressed. So trigger pressed value. And by default, it's 0. Therefore, we're going to get it here. We're going to blend. And as input to our B pin, we're going to have our blend space 1D trigger type. As trigger pressed value is going to be alpha, meaning that our VRPawn, when we press a button, is going to return the value between 0 and 1. Therefore, our alpha is how much the blend is going to apply to this animation here. 1 meaning that our blend space 1D will be applied fully. So let's actually connect our trigger pressed value to the alpha. And our trigger type input will be the same as gun type converted to float. So we can copy those 2 nodes and insert it right here. Before jumping into the gun, we need to create another input mapping context. And this context activates when we're actually grabbing the gun. So our input will be different. We want to press the trigger, we want to reload the gun, we want to throw the mag out. Therefore, we need to create specific actions for our gun. So we're heading to our VR template, to our input, 2 actions. We're going to create 3 actions for our left hand. Therefore, we right click, input action, call it IA, gun shoot left. Then we duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D. We call it IA, switch gun mode left. And we duplicate it again and call it IA, drop mag left. Let's actually open our IA gun shoot left. Instead of Boolean, we're going to choose the axis 1D float because Boolean is created just for button press, but axis 1D allows us to see how much we press the button. So we're going to choose axis 1D. Then we're going to our IA drop mag left. We double click on it. And here we just leave the bool as it is because we'll drop our mag once the button is pressed. So we don't need to see how much the button is pressed. And the same for switch gun mode. We need to switch our gun mode when our button is pressed. So now what we'll have to do is just to duplicate those input actions for our right. So highlight switch gun mode left, Ctrl D, and we change the left to right. The same we're doing for IA gun shoot left, duplicate it and change left to right. And the same for our drop mag. We duplicate it and change it to right. Once we're done with this, we just go to our input folder. So what we can do now is to change existing input mapping context. Specifically, it's weapon left and weapon right. So let's actually go to weapon left. Instead of IA shoot left, we will choose our newly created input action, IA gun shoot left. We're going to add our another mapping. It's IA drop mag left. Another one is IA switch gun mode left. So once we are done, we need to assign the keys to our input actions. So for our drop mag left, I will go for Oculus because I'm developing for Oculus. Just for my convenience, I'll choose Oculus Touch LX press. And for my switch gun mode, I will choose the same Oculus, but now for our white press. Once we're done with our IMC weapon left, we're going to our IMC weapon right. The same way we're acting here, we're choosing IA gun shoot right. We're adding one more input context. IA drop mag right, IA, switch gun mode right. We're opening those contexts, make sure the values are assigned. In case they're not, we're going to assign them. In this case, it's going to be Oculus Touch RA press, and here is Oculus Touch RB press. So now we can hit Ctrl-Shift-S, save everything, go back to our template. We are now actually going to add our pistol blueprints. So we can click on our pistol and go to our edit BB gun. Once we're here, we're going to structure our code because it will be a lot of code. Therefore, we'll create a special graph for grabbing. For our grabbing, we have our main grip collision responsible for this. So we are going to click on our grab component and let's actually rename it as main grab component. And once we're done, we're going to work with our ungrabbed and undropped. So let's actually do it. Our next step will be accessing those variables we created in our grab component. It's our hand animation left and hand animation right. So we're going to retrieve those variables in our gun. So we'll create a special function for this and let's call it get holding hand anim. And here we're going to get our main grab component, get held by hand. So we're seeing what hand is grabbing the gun. And in case it equals left, we're going to make a branch and connect our input of our function to our branch. Afterwards, we're going to get left hand anim, and we're going to get right hand anim. So in case our get held by hand equals to left, we're going to return our left hand anim. Therefore, we're adding our return node and we're returning our left hand anim. In case it's our right hand, meaning that our get held by hand left equals to false, we are returning our right hand anim. So let's structure it so it looked better and we can press compile and save. So once we are grabbing our gun, we need to see which hand we need to apply our future animation for. Therefore, we're going to get our holding hand anim here. Let's actually change the name of the variable to holding hand anim and promote it to a variable. Afterwards, we need to enable the input from our VRPawn. So we get player pawn and enable input. And here I'm from the future, if you get your player pawn, it will not actually work. So you need to get player controller and connect player controller here instead of get player pawn. Next thing we're going to do is just actually to replicate what we have in our VRPawn. So we're going to copy this piece of code here and paste it to our gun like this. And we're going to connect this pin to this pin. Also make sure you put the priority 1 because in our VRPawn, we have priority 0 for our IMC hands, and we'll have to override this context for our new input actions. So now we need to see which mapping context we need to connect, because we have two different hands, the input mapping context for left or for right hand. Therefore, we're going to get our main grab component again, we're going to get held by hand, we're going to check if it equals to left, and now we're going to select our mapping context based on what hand is holding the gun. So here, we'll connect our boolean, and in case it's left, meaning that it's true, we're going to select our weapon left. In case it's false, we're selecting our weapon right. That was when we grabbed the gun, but once we drop the gun, we need to disable our input. So from this get player pawn, let's actually structure this code here. From this get player pawn, we're going to disable input. Now from the enhanced input local player subsystem, we're going to remove mapping context, and our mapping context will be the result pin from our select. And let's structure it a little bit so it looks better, like this. So now let's comment it. Main grab. Let's change the font and let's change the color to black. Now we're going to create another graph. It will be responsible for shooting our gun. And here we'll able to add IA gun shoot left and IA gun shoot right. So let's work on the left hand first. So here we can see we have our action value. So this value is actually from 0 to 1 and it is responsible for how hard we press the button on our controller. Therefore, it will be a good idea to promote it for a variable and call it action value left. And as you remember, in our AB hand anim, we created a trigger pressed value. So now we need to communicate with our blueprint. Therefore, we are referencing our holding hand anim and we're set trigger pressed value to our action value left, and it's happening on trigger. To imitate that we are pressing our trigger, we're going to get our trigger mesh and set its relative rotation. And here we have our rotator variable. So let's actually go to the viewport and I will show you. And as you can see here, if we rotate our trigger to minus 23 degrees, it will imitate the press state. We don't want the trigger to rotate snappy, therefore we have to lower its rotation. So let's create a variable, trigger final possible rotation. is going to be of type rotator, and its final possible rotation will be -23. And also connect your trigger node to action value left, and from action value left you go to trigger pressed value. Now having our trigger final possible rotation, we're going to lerp it, but instead of input A we'll have input B, and currently our trigger mesh rotation is 0, 0, 0, therefore we do not touch A input, and our alpha will be our action value, because our action value is from 0 to 1. That will create our smooth transition. So our lerp output value, we connect to our new rotation. And afterwards we need to create our threshold for our gun. So for instance, if trigger is fully pressed, or 80% press, the gun should shoot. So we can duplicate our action value left and call it fire threshold. We can actually check if our action value left is bigger than our fire threshold, and in case it is, we'll shoot. We can move it a little bit to the top, like this. In case our trigger rotation has been cancelled or completed, it means our action value has gone to 0, so we can do this on the bottom. We can create a reroute node pressing R button. Our action value left will become 0, and our holding hand anim trigger pressed value will also become 0. For now, we can just leave it as it is. And now let's copy the same for our right hand. Instead of action value left, we'll have to create our action value right. Let's do it like this. Here we also have to replace our action value left to action value right. And action value left to the lerp will also replace with action value right. And our completed and cancelled goes to the bottom. And when we are comparing our fire threshold with action value, also make sure you replace it with right. So as you can see, we can now press the trigger on our right hand, and on our left hand we can do it as well. However, if we already holding our gun and we decide to grab it with our right hand, that's what might happen. I'm not pressing my right button, but I'm pressing my left button, and I'm controlling my right hand. That's what we're going to fix now. To address this issue, we're going to our grab component, and we're looking for our try grab function. In our try grab function, in event dispatchers, we're going to locate our onGrabbed and add an input. And our input will be our motion controller, and it will be of type motion controller component. Once we are done, we're just going to connect our motion controller reference to here. And click compile and save. Then we are going back to our BP gun. On our grabbed, we need to check if we're already holding a gun with our hands. In case we do, we need to disable the input from the opposite hand. We're going to extend our comment. We can move this code a little bit to the right. Then we can promote this to a variable, just to have it for now. So now as we can see here, our motion controller variable has appeared here. So what we're going to do is before grabbing our gun, we're going to check if we already have it in our hands. Therefore, we need to press Ctrl, drag motion controller here, right click, convert to validated get. If we're already holding our gun with different hand, this is valid will be true, so it will be valid. So in case it's already valid, we'll have to remove mapping context from the opposite hand. So that's what we're going to do. So we can get our main grab component, we can get held by hand, we can ask if it equals to right, and we can copy this node, and this node, and drag it right here. We can put it like this. And now we're going to select again. So here you need to be careful, because if our holding hand equals to right, and we are already holding the gun, it means our gun is in the left hand. We'll have to delete a mapping context that is assigned to our left hand. Therefore, if get held by hand equals to right, we're deleting weapon left. And if it equals to left, meaning that it is false, we're deleting right. And we connect it to is valid node. Afterwards, we need to clear the reference for our motion controller. Therefore, we set it to null. That's how we're going to clear our previous reference for a gun. So if we're holding a gun in the left hand, and at the same time we're trying to grab it with the right hand, the left hand motion controller will be cleared. And instead of this, we'll assign our new motion controller to the right hand. So just to make it look better, we can just select it all, and right click, collapse nodes, and call it remove mapping context from opposite hand, and clear the reference. And paste it right this, and we can move it to the right. And in case it's not valid, meaning that we are not holding the gun before grabbing it, we're just going to set up the new motion controller. And that's it. So let's hit compile and check it out. So yeah, as you can see now, I hold my gun with my left hand, and if I decide to grab it with my right hand at the same time, I have no longer control over my gun with my left hand. So the only way I can actually press my trigger is only by my right hand, but not by the left hand. And the same way works vice versa. So now we'll start working on our slide and magazine. The same, we're going to our hand folder. We are clicking on our hand skeletal mesh. We're going to our skeleton, and we can apply specific animations. We can go to our preview controller, use specific animation, and let's choose our grip. And instead of pistol mesh, we're going to click on our handgun socket, remove all attached assets, and we're going to create another socket Let's call it Handgun magazine socket, like this. And we are going to add our preview mesh, and that's going to be magazine, Handgun magazine. It has been added. We need to adjust it to our hand. So let's actually move it a little bit here, like this. Now we need to adjust the index fingers. Okay, so this is what I did. We can actually press create asset, create animation, current pose, and save it as anim qk handgun magazine. Now let's create another animation for our sliders. So we're going to do the same, hand R, add socket. We're going to use our temporary socket. So I named it temporary socket because we'll not need the socket in any future. So we need it only for now, just to orient our hand in the right way and save the animation. So let's go ahead and remove all attached assets. Right click, add preview asset. Let's add our slider. I will just try to orient it. If you want to save your time, you can just copy the location and rotation. Let's also create asset, create animation, current pose, and let's call it anim qk handgun slider. And let's save it to animations. Now we'll need to modify our blend space 2D. So we're going to our blend space 2D hand anims. And just to remind us, we have our gun type and object type. If we look at our gun type, our handgun is index 0. Therefore, we're looking on our 0th element. And our object type is our magazine. So 0, 1. Magazine is first index. So we're looking on 0, 1. So here. And now we have to grab our handgun magazine to this position. It needs to be 1 here. So it will be the smooth blending. And our reload handle is 0, 1, 2, so it's second. So we'll take our handgun slider to the second position, right here. We'll have to create another grab component, so another type of grabbing. It will be specifically for our slider, for our magazine, and for our silencer. So let's go ahead and look for our grab component. As you can see here, we have our grab component and grab type. So we'll create another grab component. So what we can do is just to duplicate existing one, call it curl grab component. And for our curl grab component, we'll have a curl grab type enumerator. Blueprint, enumerator, it will be curl grab type. Double click on it. We are going to add 4 enumerators. The first one will be for grabbing our reload handle. The second one is for magazine. The third one is for silencer. And first one, we can leave just none, just in case we need it. Okay, now we can open our curl grab component. We can go to our try grab. We're going to change our grab type's type. So instead of grab type, we're going to have our curl grab type and change variable type. So now we can just remove this one since it doesn't exist anymore, and we're going to right switch again. So in case it's reload handle, we're just going to leave is held because we're going to attach our hand to the gun mesh. We don't need to attach parent to motion controller. Afterwards, we're going to get held by hand. We're going to see which hand we're holding the reload handle with. We're going to switch, can move it down. And in case it's left, we're just going to set left hand animation by object type, 2 of them. In case it's left, we're going to set object is our reload handle and object is our reload handle. And for the right. Regarding the magazine, we're going to delete this piece of code here and connect the magazine pin to this pin, since now we are attaching the magazine to our motion controller. And afterwards, we are going to check which gun this magazine belongs to. So let's switch on this one. In case it's our handgun, we're going to get held by hand, and we're going to use this function. Attach left hand object to socket. And as we remember, we've created a socket for our magazine. So let's go ahead and copy its name and paste it right here. And the same we're going to do for our right hand. So left pin goes here, right pin goes here. And then we are setting left hand animation by object type and right hand animation by object type. And our object type will be now magazine. Okay, we can hit compile. We'll see other errors. So we're just going to click on them. So as we can see here, we need to delete this switch and create a new one that belongs to our grab type now. We create then pin to this pin. So in case it's not, we can right away set to is held as none. And in case it's any other type, we just connect it right here. So our hand is actually a child of our motion controller. So what we're going to do when we're grabbing our slider is that we're going to ruin this hierarchy here. We're going to detach our hand and attach it to the pistol, but our motion controller will still exist. Therefore, we need to check if our motion controller is still in parent's components of the object we are trying to attach. So in case in our handle, we're attaching our hand to the gun, but in case in our silencer or our magazine, we attach it to the hand. We do not attach hand to the magazine or the silencer. Therefore, that's the essential check. That's why we're going to our grab component. We're breaking this link. We're getting an additional check, and we're looking for get parent components. And we're getting our motion controller reference. And we're trying to find it. And if this result equals to -1, it means it has not been found, then we do not need to detach it from component. That's the case of our gun. We will be trying to detach our gun from nowhere. It's parent to itself. It's not the parent to our motion controller. Therefore, we do not need to detach it explicitly. In that case, we'll just need to break this link and attach hand back to motion controller. If we didn't manage to find, we'll do the logic in our gun, so we do not need to detach it. But in case it's false, we'll have to explicitly detach it, like this. And we can actually make it a little bit longer, like that. So we can comment it out. Checking if motion controller is in parent component. Now we're heading to our VRPawn and we are going to our hand animation input data past animation blueprint section, and we'll move those two blocks underneath each other like this. And specifically, we'll be looking for our hand index curl left and right. So what we're going to do is that since we have created a new component, we'll make the similar logic for our curl component as for our grab component. So let's actually copy all of this code here and move it for our curl. So this one was for our grab left, so it means here we'll have it for our curl left and paste it right here. The main difference here is that our index curl has also some Boolean variables here. So what we're going to do is once we initiate a grab, so once the action value has exceeded the animation threshold, we're going to grab only once, but our triggered is triggered every frame. So we're going to solve this every frame problem with do once node, so that once it exceeded the threshold, our curl grab component could grab only once. We are going to connect this pin to here. And if it's cancelled or completed, we're going to do the sequence. We're going to connect our first pin to reset the do once so we could grab again. Okay, so now it's time to replace the variables. First of all, we are going to our get grab component near motion controller. We can find this function right here. We're going to duplicate it and name it get curl grab component near motion controller. Our input here will be motion controller, everything is okay. Then instead of local nearest grab component, we're going to create and return local nearest curl component. Find local nearest grab component, we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to rename it local nearest curl grab component. And its type will be curl grab component. Okay, wonderful. Now we can get it here. In our return node, we can clear the output. Also guys, it's me from future, so don't use the same name in return variable and return variable name, because it will trigger some errors, so I just let you know in advance so we didn't waste time on fixing all of those errors. The same way, we're going to replace our local grab components. So we're going to delete this node and change the get component by class. We're going to change it to curl grab component and create it from here. So we will promote it to a variable and call it local nearest curl grab component. And if it's true, we're going to connect it back, and then we're going to do our for each loop. So for each loop body will connect here. For the array element, as you can see, it goes away to local nearest grab component. We need to exchange it for local nearest curl grab component, like this. And like this. And we also need to check if its parent is a primitive component. And if you wish, you can actually replace this float variable right here, local nearest component distance, but we'll not use it, so I'll just leave it here. In case you need it, you'll just replace it. Also make sure on the trace channel, you select the curl grabbable. We can hit compile again and check if the length is bigger than 0. Hit compile again. So we are getting some errors. Oh, and I forgot to link it here. Compile. Okay, as you can see now, we don't have any errors. Make sure you have everything same. Okay, we can go back and now replace our get grab component near motion controller to get curl grab component near motion controller like this. And we can put it to like this way. Also make sure to use a different return variable name right there from the variable we returned. Now we can connect the motion control left grip to here. Okay, we remove this, replace it. Afterwards, we are calling the try grab function. So here we're calling it from our previous grab component. We're going to call it with our current grab component. We can create a reroute node. Try grab like this is valid, and motion control left grip we connect here. Let's remove those connections so we can make them our own like that, and is held. branch. And instead of health component left, we're going to change it for health curl component left. So we can duplicate health component left and code health curl component left. Change it to curl grab component. And set it right here instead of health component left, like this. And create one more reroute node. And then we're going to connect it to this pin. And also we have here health component left and right. So we need to change them for curl components also. So let's duplicate health component right for health curl component right. And change it to curl grab component like this. And let's put them here. So, and here we'll do also health component right. Now let's go down here. We're checking our health component left is valid. Instead of this, we're going to check if our health curl component left is valid. So control, drag it here, right click, convert to validated again, connect to this node, is valid. And from here, we're going to do try release. And connect it right here. And health component left must be health curl component left. We're going to copy this code and paste it for our curl index right here. Now we connect this pin here and this pin we connect here. Instead of motion controller left grip, we're going to use motion controller right grip. Everything else is the same. So here we are also using right grip. So here we're using health curl component right. We can delete this one. Health curl component left. Health curl component right. And a health curl component right. And let's actually go to the cube and try to edit it. So as you remember, we have our static mesh. We need to add some kind of collision. So let's say it's collision box right here. That's the area I can grab my cube. Collision settings are set to ignore everything except for our curl grabbable. And under this collision box, we'll have curl grab component, and its grab type is magazine and gun type is handgun. Also make sure to delete this grab component since we are not longer using it. So let's jump into the game and see if it works. So we can actually come here, and as we can see now, it works and it snaps to our socket we have created for our magazine. However, it seems like animation is not working, so that's what we are going to do now. So as you've seen, you can only grab a cube, but now we also have to set up the animations. We can go to our AB hand anim, and we can go to our event graph. So in part 1, we've set up everything only for our regular grab component, but now we have to set up everything also for our curl grab component. So what we're going to do is actually to retrieve our health curl component left, get health curl component left. We're going to check if it's valid, and also we're going to check if it's held. In the execution pin of this is valid, we're going to connect this one. If our held component left is valid, we're going to connect it to the branch created from our is held. And if is held true, we're connecting here. If is held false, we connect it here. Yeah, it's pretty messy, but we have to do it. And is not valid node, we're going to connect here. Oh yeah, as you can see, okay, you can see, but the animation is actually applied. So for our left hand, as you can see when I'm grabbing the cube, it's actually applied. So this animation is created for our handgun, for our magazine, but we don't see because we have grabbed the cube. So let's actually duplicate it for our right hand too. Let's move everything for the right hand a little bit lower. So for our right hand, we are doing completely the same. We're getting curl component right, get held curl component right. We're checking if it's valid. We're checking if it's held. So if it's valid, we're creating a branch where plugging is held here. If it's true, we're going to this pin. If it's false, we're continuing this way. And if not valid, we're continuing this way. And also make sure you plug is not valid pin from this is valid node to this node. And you can clear up this reroute node here. So let's compile, save, and jump into the game and see if it works. Okay, finally we made it work. So as you can see now, our animation works. You cannot see the animation, but you can see that our fingers actually do something when we grab. Now it's time to create our magazine. So let's go ahead to our guns folder, to our guns, to our handgun, and create a folder called blueprints. And in this folder, we're going to create our blueprint class. We're going to create actor and name it BP magazine. First of all, we're going to add our mesh. So we're going to press add static mesh, and our mesh will be handgun magazine. We can replace the default scene root by our static mesh, and let's rename it magazine. Then we're going to add our instant static mesh. The main difference between instant static mesh and static mesh is that instant static mesh can create a lot of static meshes inside of it. In this way, we'll represent our bullet stack inside the magazine. Then we're going to have our box collision. That's for grabbing our magazine. We can call it to pickup collision. And let's just make it fit the magazine. So here we're defining the bounds we can grab our magazine with. So make sure you fit your magazine like this. Under the pickup collision, we're going to have our curl grab component. And finally, we're going to have our magazine collision. That will be the collision we'll use for inserting the magazine into the handgun. So we can go ahead and move it to the top of the magazine. This. So now let's go through the collision settings. First of all, we're starting with our magazine mesh. So our magazine mesh will have a custom collision preset. It will have type weapon. It is going to ignore those 3 channels, 3D widget, grabbable, curl grabbable, and it will ignore the magazine. Everything else it will block. Then we're going for our instant static mesh. We can actually rename it ISM round. And its static mesh is going to be 9x round. So now you will not see the round because we need some custom code for this, but just leave it as it is and also go to the collision preset, and our rounds here will have no collision. Then we have our pickup collision. So our pickup collision is pretty simple. We're just going to have a custom collision preset. We are going to ignore everything instead of the curl grabbable because we are using our curl grab component to grab the magazine. Therefore, this channel should block curl grabbable. Afterwards, we overlap our weapon and we block the magazine. Then we have our curl grab component. So we can go ahead and change grab type to magazine and gun type to handgun. And lastly, we'll have our magazine collision. So our magazine collision will also have a custom preset. It will be of type magazine. It will overlap visibility camera. It will ignore all other channels in trace responses. Then it will overlap everything else. Okay, so we can actually Ctrl-Shift-S and hit compile button. Let's go to our level and actually put the magazine in here like this, and jump into the game and see if it works. So yeah, as you can see, now our animation is actually applied. I failed a little bit with my middle finger, but you can go ahead and fix it. So let's go ahead and implement the rounds. And feel free to go ahead to your level and delete this fire cue because it gets on my nerves. Okay guys, so as soon as we are in our BP magazine, I worked with the code of the bullets. However, I'm not going to explain it because I've actually taken the idea and I can barely understand it too. But what we're going to do is that we're going to our construction script. We're going to create another function, so we can go ahead and press plus function. So the purpose of the function is to find if the number is even. We're going to name it as even number, add input, and we're going to name it number of type integer. Then we're going to divide it by modulo. So we're trying to find the remainder, and if the remainder equals to 0, it means that the number is even. Otherwise, it's not even. And just for your convenience, make sure it's pure, so it didn't require any execution nodes. Then we're going to our construction script, and yeah, it's a lot of code. So first of all, we have created override around mesh as a variable. It's going to be a static mesh variable. We dragged it into the blueprint, right-clicked on it, and converted to validated get. That's how this node is created. This variable is actually created for overriding our mesh of ISM rounds. If you don't want to set it up through the editor, you can set it up through the variable. That's why this variable was created, but if you don't want to use it, you can just remove it. So in case it's valid, we're going just to set the static mesh right here, or in case it's not valid, it means we can already do it from here. It doesn't matter where you do, or you assign your mesh and override your own mesh, or you assign your mesh through ISM rounds here. It doesn't matter. So then we're creating our rounds variable. It's going to be a variable of integers, and we're creating our for loop that goes from index 1 to the amount of rounds we have in our magazine. And every index from our for loop, we're going to promote to a variable. So drag it here, promote to a variable. From this index, we are having stacking uniform width and height offset. So the function we recently created is even number. We're going to plug here, connect index here, and the return from this function, we're just going to connect here. So then you're going to create a new Boolean variable called flip stacking and check if those two equal to each other. If you notice some of the variables you don't have, just be free to add them. Okay guys, so at this point, it becomes really hard to understand everything and I waste a lot of time on explaining. I'm going to show you all the code right now, so be free to replicate it. And remember, if you don't see any variables, just be free to create ones. And I'll zoom out a little bit so you could see all the beauty here. So again, I'm showing you this part of code. Then I will show you this part of code. So just try to replicate it because guys, I cannot explain what is happening here. Okay, and after we're done with this, just hit compile and save. We're going to our viewport. I've already set up the variables. We're going to click on our BP magazine, get to our details panel, and be free to copy all of those values here. And also be free to play with them. Maybe you have different magazines, so you can just play with those values and see what they're doing. So you can maybe create a curve strength, like do you see what's happening with our bullets, and just basically try to play with the values. So once we're done, just compile and save. So as we can see here, now in our pistol, we're having actually the bullets in our magazine. Let's just go ahead and create a special category and put all of the variables we have right now to this category. So let's name it magazine setup and just put all of the variables under magazine setup. After you're done, you can just collapse this. Now we can create some easy functions we'll need for our functionality. So let's go ahead and create a new function. Now let's call it multicast, remove cartridge mesh instance. So it will be responsible for removing a bullet from our magazine. So let's go ahead and drag our ISM rounds, and our instance index will be our index in the magazine setup that we have right here. Let's connect it right to this. And so that's it for this function. Now we're going ahead and create a function that will remove our round based on the logic. So we're going to create our variable. We can call it boolean. It will be of type boolean, and we'll call it is empty. So we're going to create a new function called remove round. In this function, we're going to check if magazine is empty. In case it's not empty, we're going to get our rounds variable. We're going to subtract 1, and we're going to set it to rounds and connect the false pin to the set pin. After we've decremented our rounds, we can use our multicast remove cartridge mesh instance, and we're going to check if our rounds after removing 1 are going to equal to 0. We create a branch. So in case it's empty, we set is empty to true. And in case it's false, we're setting is empty to false. After we're done, we get a return node like this, and we're returning our is empty. And our true pin from here, we're connecting here. It seems like a weird logic, right? That we check that is empty is true here, and again we're checking if is empty is true here. So the reason we're doing this is that we're having a lot of bullets in the magazine, and also there is one in the chamber. So once they are all done, there is still one left in the chamber. When we are trying to shoot, our magazine will be empty, but there still will be one bullet in the chamber. So that's the essential check we should do. Afterwards, we're going to create another two variables. They will be responsible for our sounds. So let's create a variable called mag in sound. It will be a sound cue, and we'll have mag out sound. It will be also a sound cue. And therefore, let's create a function called play in sound. We'll get our magazine. We'll get its word location. We'll do play sound at location, and our sound will be mag in sound and connect it like this. Also, let's duplicate this function. So highlight the play in sound, Control D, and call it play out sound. And instead of mag in sound, we're going to replace it by mag out sound. And we'll create one more function and call it has round. So for here, we're getting our rounds variable. We're checking if it doesn't equal to 0 and return this variable. Compile, Ctrl-Shift-S, save everything. Okay, congratulations, our magazine is fully done. Now we need to work on a gun. That's going to be the hardest part in this tutorial. And I think guys, tutorial is already over 35 or 36 minutes. I actually think it would be better to make a part 3.